Hi everyone, welcome back to this episode of the POSHpod Season 3, where my co-host Bishen Jeswant, who is a partner in the employment law practice at Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas, and me, Laxmi Char, co-founder at Parity, are discussing elements of the POSH Act. And, Bishen had asked me this question off camera, and I said, hey, let's talk a little bit about that, because the question that we were thinking about is there something in the Act that in the last 10 years, based on the way that it's been implemented in the corporate world, leaves a certain kind of question mark, right? And I was sharing with Bishen, and Bishen, my question to you, right? There does not seem to be any specific kind of wording that addresses the possibility of retaliating against an aggrieved woman after her, her complaint has been disposed of. Is there anything in the Act that the IC could, learn about and interpret and use to address this?
Hey Lakshmi, good day everyone. Great question. And it's true that the POSH Act doesn't have specific language on retaliation, and retaliation is a genuine big concern because of the power imbalance involved in a lot of the POSH complaints. You see a senior respondent against a junior complainant, right? So there is definitely scope for retaliation, and it would be nice if the POSH Act expressly addressed that. But in the absence of that, there is still enough in the POSH Act to deal with this, right? So, which is Section 3 is the section that you're referring to if anybody wants to go back and look at the wording in the Act, right? So this is a section which sets out a whole bunch of actions which, if you just look at them independently, don't look like sexual harassment, right? And the section starts by saying these actions or these circumstances, if they exist in connection with sexual harassment, amount to sexual harassment. And so what are these? To break these up into two broad buckets, they are quid pro quo situations and they are hostile work environment situations, right? So either creating a threat of or, actually creating a detrimental impact to your employment or a status to your employment, or threat of or actually implementing preferential treatment in employment, right? Would be examples of sexual harassment, even though by themselves the mere act of giving preferential treatment in employment may not seem sexual. If it happens in connection with sexual harassment, then it would be sexual harassment, or creating a hostile or intimidating work environment for an individual. Again, that sentence by itself doesn't have a sexual element to it. But if it is happening in connection with sexual harassment, and how would that be? So if, let's say, there is a senior manager who's pursuing a junior employee very strongly and she rebuffs his advances multiple times, and then during the next, let's say, promotion cycle or increment cycle, she gets a bad increment or doesn't get promoted when she should otherwise have based on merit. Now this involves two acts of sexual harassment, right? One is the act of pursuing her strongly despite her rebuffing his advances. That is sexual harassment. But in connection with that, there has now been a promotion which didn't happen, which should have. And now, so the not giving of a promotion is also sexual harassment. And I know a listener could then here ask, what is the point of there being two grounds of sexual harassment? If he is anyway going to be found guilty of the first one, how does it matter if there is an extra ground? The reality is he probably would, face some sanctions in any case based on the first action alone. That is where the retaliation part comes. So let's say that the first round of actions happened, he pursued her strongly, she rebuffed his advances, and based on that she files the complaint, right? And he is found guilty, and let's say he's given a warning. Now, after this, he effectively doesn't promote her, right? That is, there is detrimental treatment to her employment or impacting the status of her employment. And if the woman is able to show and file another complaint to say that he didn't promote me, and that is sexual harassment, he could be found guilty independently of that second act as being sexual harassment, and possibly could be fired for it. Right? Yeah. Which he may not otherwise have been fired for if he simply didn't promote a person. That may not have been a fireable offense. But here, because he is being found guilty of sexual harassment the second time, there is a greater chance of him actually being fired. So there is power in the hands of the IC to deal with such instances as retaliation. and fire people for retaliation being sexual harassment, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It does to me, but I have kind of like a nuance, right? Because a couple of times when the woman who's going through the situation comes up to me as an external member, says, hey, want to talk to you. She has not actually filed a complaint earlier. So manager has made sexual advances. She has rebuffed him. And it seems like he's accepted it, right? So he tried a couple of times. And then when she very strongly said, look, no, not interested, he kind of stopped. And within 3 months, it's the annual kind of evaluation cycle. And she mysteriously finds that from being the top quartile of team performers, she's dropped down to the bottom quartile. And in one particular case, she was even put on a performance improvement plan. That's when she went to HR and said that, hey, I suspect the reason why this has happened to me is because I said no to him. So it's almost like you said, the quid pro quo, like the carrot and the stick.
Yeah.
So this is the stick that she's facing with. So in that case, can she raise a complaint, a POSH complaint at that time, not having raised one earlier?
She definitely can, because under the POSH Act, right, you can file a complaint within, currently it is 3 months of the last incident of sexual harassment, right? So
Correct.
here there are, now the way the act is worded, the section 3 I'm referring to, so the first action of pursuing despite being rebuffed is sexual harassment. But the last incident in that series happened later down the line when she got a bad performance appraisal. So then, as long as she files a complaint within 3 months from then, that can legitimately be taken up by the IC. And IC will, like I said earlier, IC will then look at this as 2 grounds of sexual harassment, which is still relevant, right? The first one, pursuing despite rebuffing, to giving a bad performance appraisal. And if it was only the first one, maybe he would only have been, let's say, maybe the manager would not have received a bonus or a promotion. But now, because those 2 grounds are serious enough, maybe he can be terminated from employment on that basis. So there is still value in there being 2 grounds as opposed to 1. And knowing that the second ground of giving a bad performance appraisal is sexual harassment. And that lets an IC, combine 2 grounds of sexual harassment to impose a proportionate sanction.
Yeah. So that's so interesting. So let me share another kind of scenario, right? And this was a couple of peers, colleagues, who had a consensual office romance, and then the romance broke up. She moved on. He continued to, and I'm using this term because this is the term that she used in her complaint. She said, he hounds me. He hounds me every day, asking for an explanation as to why I have broken up with him. I don't believe that I need to provide this. We've broken up. I've moved on. I'm living my life. I just want him to leave me alone. So his point is, I'm okay to leave her alone as long as she explains to me what's wrong with me. Why is she not interested in me anymore? And we were wondering whether Section 3 would even apply over there, because she turned around and said, I can't even do my job.
Okay, so this would not be a Section 3 situation. It would still be sexual harassment, right? And that there is a person who's trying to pursue you romantically after the relationship is ended. So in this fact situation, I would separate the fact that there has been a previous relationship and just look at the hounding independently, right?
Yeah.
When you're hounding a person for a romantic relationship, whether it's an explanation for why they don't want to be in a relationship or whatever, the reality is that they are hounding them in relation to a romantic relationship, right? So that independent fact would be sexual harassment by itself. Forget they had a relationship in the past. So there isn't, this wouldn't be a Section 3 situation where there is a quid pro quo or creation of a hostile work environment based in connection with sexual harassment. Because if there was anything sexual which happened during the relationship, that at the time when it happened was not an unwelcome advance. That was not sexual harassment. So the hounding now cannot be a second incident happening in connection with that, in connection with sexual harassment, because anything sexual that happened during the relationship was not sexual harassment, assuming that it was with consent, right?
Yeah, it was totally
so,
consensual.
Yeah, so then this would be sexual harassment, but not under Section 3.
Okay, but the Act does cover it, and this is a complaint. The IC does have jurisdiction to take up this complaint.
Correct, it would.
Yeah, and talking of jurisdiction, there was one more case. I'm going to pick your brains now, right? And I'm hoping that the listeners are kind of looking at this or listening to this and thinking about what they would have done in these circumstances. Share with us your opinion, folks. But Bishen, we talked about earlier on about the PIP, about the woman who was put in a PIP within that time period. How about in a particular organization, large organization with multiple offices in the same city, the woman goes to HR and it starts with her saying, hey, my manager has arbitrarily transferred me from location A to location B. He knows very well that location A is within, a half-hour commute of my home, and location B is significantly further away. I believe that he is, doing this out of spite. And when the HR person kind of, sat and tried to unravel it, it turns out that she had rebuffed his advances, but this was probably 4 or 5 months ago. So it sounds awful for me to say this, but it's almost like, everybody's been through the training. Everybody knows it's 3 months plus 3 months at the discretion of the IC. So you wait 6 months and then you do something, right? So it was 6 months later and he transfers her. And he claims that, no, this is just a regular admin thing. She says he's targeting me because of this situation.
Yeah, so this is again has to be borne out by the facts, and so there is no reason for the IC not to take this up. This is similar to the example we discussed earlier, where there is one set of actions which is sexual harassment, the person pursuing her when she, rebuffed him, and now he is transferred on that basis, right? So it would have to be demonstrated during the proceedings that the act of transferring the individual had no good faith basis or a commercial reasonable business basis, right? So in the absence of that, and the woman being able to show that this was in light of the, him pursuing her, that the transfer eventually happened, it would definitely be sexual harassment and squarely fall under Section 3 as well. There would be no issue here of the timeline for filing the complaint, because the act of transfer would be the last in the series of incidents that happened, and as long as the woman filed the complaint within the 3 plus 3 month period from when the transfer happened, there should be no issue with taking it up. And the IC itself, forget the timeline. If the IC is to determine if it has jurisdiction on this matter, the answer is yes. There is no reason not to take up the matter just because the complaint pertains to a wrongful transfer, which on the face of it is not sexual, as long as there could in the background be a sexual harassment basis for which the transfer happened. So the IC should take it up and analyze this to see if there is sexual harassment in fact.
Very nice. So Bishen, just to kind of round up, everything that we've been speaking of, a people manager does have administrative and fiduciary responsibility to the organization that employs him, right? And he should, in fact, conduct himself along, the accepted behavior patterns. However, if it is not an admin issue, if there is, a toxic situation that has been created because of sexual harassment in the background, it is something that the IC can, in fact, take up, investigate, and in the course of the investigation, figure out what the situation is. If it is sexual harassment, do what needs to be done. And if it's not, then, send it back to HR to deal with that as a workplace grievance, maybe.
Yeah, that's correct. Spot on. I just want to add one small point here, unrelated to what you said last, but previously you were talking about how the complainant may have gone to HR to discuss certain matter. As a separate episode, we should probably discuss here what the role of the HR can be in dealing with complaints of POSH. Maybe the HR is not the right person to be hearing complaints of sexual harassment in the first place. So for another episode, but I wanted to flag that off for our viewers as well, that there is a bit of a gray area there about the role of HR in POSH complaints. Okay.
Let's talk about HR, because I think it is a headache in the making. And on that note, thank you so much, Bishen. As always, lovely chatting with you. Viewers, listeners, keep the comments flowing.
Bye, everyone. Catch you on the next episode. Bye-bye.